Hello and welcome to Conscious Conversation, episode number 22 with myself, Craig Seaton, and...
Chet Carson, and we're here, episode number 22, isn't it?
22.
See, the issue is we could have, because of the lockdown and the way things have gone, we've completely forgotten or lost track of time and the number of episodes because we tend to shoot 2 episodes per week on a regular occasion. But this week we've only done 1. This is the only one that we're shooting. And this is going to be out this afternoon. No, actually, we're in the afternoon right now, this evening. So this podcast will be out this evening, which will be a first for us to shoot a podcast and then to release it immediately. So
that's your hard work, that, man. Yeah. I can't take any credit for that effort. That's all you.
That means more pressure on me now. Right, how are you doing, bud?
Good, man. Yeah, good. What are we in? August the 6th?
Yep.
Wow, August the 6th. Yeah, I've done give myself a little caffeine ban for a few days. It was day 20 now. Come off social media for 30 days, giving that a crack as well. And yeah, as life's kind of resuming, back to the gym. Had my first session in the gym yesterday with a client. So it's been a good strong August, I think.
Yeah, what's the reason for the social media detox?
So I do this at least once a year. I'll take a month out. But generally I think it's really good to do around Christmas. Something that Gary Vaynerchuk, I can never pronounce his surname, Gary V. He did a little post about it around Christmas or a few months ago saying disconnect at that time so you can connect more with the family, and I was like, oh, it's good to do it around Christmas, but I would just do it sporadically when I think, okay, I've had enough now. And I think getting towards, I was feeling a bit overloaded with information and seeing, I've had a big pull for stillness recently, just to, I think I mentioned it a few months ago about not reading so much content from other people or learning from other books or courses, is just letting it assimilate into where I'm at and what's going on with me. Definitely great stuff to learn out there always, but I think always being stimulated from outside and looking for other knowledge or the next thing, searching for the answer or God outside of ourselves, will always lead us on a search. And to taper that down to social media, I just felt like there's too much going on at the minute. I might be reading some great stuff or looking at some great pictures, but ultimately what for, when I've got things that I'm working on now and I can be more with myself and not needing to do that. And also I noticed when it was about up to the second day of just 2 days, I'd remove the icons from my phone, and then subconsciously I'd sit down and my phone would be out and it would just be looking for the button, and it'd be like, it's as if the hand was a mind of its own. I thought, right, there's an issue there. Subconsciously, I'm looking to fill that space of just waiting for abs or waiting in a queue or something. That the hand just wants to go, oh, give me some dopamine, or go look at this, or go read that. Taking away when that movement can be used for meditation or stillness or just to observe without wanting to be stimulated. And even the button and the call, the notifications coming through, and it's like, oh, get rid of them. And just to see how much of a blind control it has. And I do think I'm quite good with these things, but that was a level of unconsciousness that I had. It's trying to press the button when the button's not bloody there. I noticed the space where you'd press it. It's like, what are you doing? Your hand's alive, Yeah. So that was one of the reasons what I've felt with it so far. And I have popped on a few times. I didn't know Instagram had that ability where you can see how long you've been on it for. So I found that, and it said in the last week it's been 3 minutes. So which is great. I've really not been using it because I would use it to use my posts, and it's really seen that I was a scroller and didn't admit it to myself. So it's like, right, I can be on this now. I will go back to using it because I love to share what I want to share, and it helped develop the breathwork community that I have online. But it's been very disciplined in the use of it going ahead. It will slip again, I'm sure, but I'll always have at least 30 days out every year. Facebook I wasn't really using anyway, so that's not been a thing. Messenger, I've been able to go on and not tempted to look at Facebook. So it's using the tools to the best of our ability.
Yeah, it's definitely a distraction. It's a huge distraction. And like you said, it can become very autonomous where you start swiping through without even realizing that you're doing it. So there are a couple of times when, it's funny, when I'm climbing and stuff, I look at my phone and the first thing I look at is the time. And there were occasions where my friend was like, I said to him, what time is it? And he goes, I don't know, but I just looked at my phone 10 seconds ago. I didn't look at the time. I was like, then why do you look at your phone? He goes, I have no idea. So this is it, that compulsion of just having to just flick through your phone a couple of times. And I think, yeah, like you said, the fact that these apps these days tell you how long you're spending on the phone, it just shows you that we are dedicating a large portion of our time towards the devices. And again, it's something that Sadhguru says. He says that, we already spend, the average person already spends 8 hours a day sleeping, which is a third of the day wasted. Well, we can say wasted, but you're in this environment where you're not doing anything apart from just resting and spending time in a completely different part of reality. So he says what he's done is he only sleeps 4 hours a day or something. And people ask him, like, how do you survive if you're only sleeping 4 hours a day? And he says it's not the sleep that you need, it's the rest. It's how much rest you're actually having. So you can probably vouch for this when you were younger, but there are times in the summertime when your parents will put you to bed at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening. In the wintertime, it's fine because it gets darker by 3 or 4. But in the summertime, you're just lounging around for 3 hours on your bed before you finally fall asleep. So again, are you actually resting or are you actually sleeping? So there's a difference between the two, and it's understanding the difference between the two. So going back to social media, we can get into a habit of using it for just as a distraction or just something that's quite habitual, just swiping through, as opposed to using it for a purpose, which is what we tend to do, because I don't use Facebook as well. The last time I updated my profile picture was in 2013, so it's been a while. And the only social media platform I use at the moment is obviously YouTube because of our podcasts and stuff, and Instagram. So using Instagram to relay whatever message that you want to relay. So yeah, I think it's vitally important that we track that. And I think it also goes into how much time we are also talking to ourselves in our head. So as social media, the more you swipe through social media, the more you're having these discussions of your head. Oh, he looks great, or oh, she looks plastic, or he looks fake, and all the stuff that you're always judging people, and we're basically having a conversation with ourselves. And I think before this podcast, we were talking about that documentary on YouTube. I was going to send it over to you, but my phones are on flight mode, both of them. And yeah, so it's about this monk called Sri Ramanan. And I can't remember his surname, but it's Sri Ramanan something. It'll come to me halfway through the podcast. But yeah, he was known as the yogi that was silent. So the way he would portray his messages is through other means apart from speech. So if you spent time with him, he would still talk to you if he felt as though his message was not going to be fully relayed, if you were someone new to his environment or his philosophy. But he would limit what he would say as well. So he felt as though that your body has other ways of transferring or transmutating knowledge without asking you to open your mouth. And I think by opening your mouth, we already lose half of the translation. So if I feel love for someone, I can't describe my love for someone based on words. You're having to almost water it down or sensationalize it for you to be able to describe that feeling towards someone else. So there are other ways of doing it, from the way you show love to someone. So in that context, he felt as though one of the best ways to transfer messages through is through osmosis, so which is water being obviously transported from one part to the next part. And he goes, that's a great way of transferring messages from the way I feel, because we know that the human body is 70% water. So he goes, there is an exchange of chemistry and chemicals in the air that happen between two individuals. So if you surround yourself with a person, you probably know this as well, if you surround yourself with a group of people that are cheerful and very very peaceful, you tend to become more uplifted. So in the same context, spending time with a person that's negative, you're going to have that same negative effect on you. So yeah.
I think pulls in with feeling as well. I think feeling is, for the average way of living, is it's just something that we're associating to emotion. This made me feel this and that feels this, or this drink, food, drug makes me feel a certain way. But not being aware of what you've just said, that feeling of being around people will link these two circles, and you're absorbing from somebody else, and being open to it, and what energy healing is, or being around people with a high energy. If you pay attention to yourself and cultivate awareness of that, which takes time, but that's developed through sensitivity, cleansing the body, cleansing the mind, and being aware of these more subtle things, you will be uplifted by that person's energy as it cycles through you. Or if you're not stable in that, you can be pulled down by other people's energy. And we're studying the Kriya Yoga and how the effects of the prana in the body, so people who do regular breath work or meditation, and they're cleaning the prana, bringing more prana into the cells, which lightens them all. And all that feeling is from others is something that we're capable of feeling, because we can take in. We have to have, that's why we all grow, we develop the body a certain way to take in that more prana and energy, and being around people like this yogi he was doing it through silent means, because everything's being transmitted all the time, whether we're aware of it or not, whether it's via the feeling or verbal, and verbal only being a gross level of doing it because it's narrow, and it's memory because we respond to certain words, like that's already programmed into us, so we can totally miscue what it is, or it won't get through because of the perception we have. While if it's let's be silent, you know, detox yourself through that way and be around the energy of that person, that thing, and or that room, and it will have the effect, and you can work with it. So definitely it's a big aspect of it. I want to mention what you said about Sadhguru sleeping 4 hours. I had an experience, I think it was last year, where I was doing that much, did big fast, did a 7-day water fast, and I was only eating clean foods. It was like 2 meals a day, just vegetables and fruits, nothing I went through. I'm not having anything processed or anything like that, no stimulants. And I was at that point where I was sleeping 4 to 6 hours. And this wasn't just from that, it'd been a long time coming of my daily, you know, doing Kriyas every day, like twice a day, really going for it. And what the rest was about, and there's a video I wanted to show you actually, I stumbled across the other day doing my Kriya studies, I'll send it to you, from this yogi, and it had just gone off, what's his name again, autobiography of a yogi?
Swami Yogananda.
Yogananda, yeah, it was off the trail from Yogananda, and what he was saying about we rest, and we go into unconsciousness to rest because we don't have enough energy within us, and we have to go to that unconsciousness to completely recharge. We're not just going into unconscious sleep, we're taking cosmic energy. You know, the soul or the heart, it's bringing that cosmic energy in. And if we do so much and we keep expelling and spending our energy, we need to sleep because we're not knackered. It's not just a physical thing, it's on all those other levels. And the reasons would be like Sadhguru or other people, yes, they cleanse their body, they're using energy so much more effectively, so they don't need to sleep as long. And that was something I experienced by doing those practices and eating so clean. I was amazed. It was like, and it wasn't just a few days, it was like for a good solid 3 to 5 weeks where 4 to 6 hours sleep and I was fine. I didn't set an alarm or anything, and I'd just wake up and be like, I have energy to start the day. And it was about that, the purification of the self, and it's not where I am at the minute, but it's something that, having that experience, I want to live there and I want to get back towards it now. And part of the detox of what I've done with the social media, and what you said before about, you know, the scrolling, I found myself just getting critical of other people just by being on social media. And it's like, I don't see myself as that person. Obviously it's within me because of whatever tools I'm using, the critical eyes coming through. And it's like, if I'm not posting something on there, is the information I'm seeing bringing anything to my life other than I would like that, or be critical about that, or why are they doing it that way? Like, what is the point? If, like, you know, I want to see what you're up to climbing, I'd much rather hear about it from you. Like, the pictures are beautiful and brilliant, but I don't need to see them. It's like, oh, I'll hear from the story, or, you know, the things that we share out ourselves. Even, you know, what I'm posting on Instagram doesn't have to be seen by people. It's, if they're looking for a certain something, like how to do breathwork or whatever, go to the right page, and Instagram will bring it for that. And I think that's really the importance of what we're specifically showing out, whether it's personal or whether it's what, our work. Are we clear enough with what we're doing with it? Do you know what I mean? Because finding people's stuff and it being even genuine from them, if I'm being critical, it's not serving me well. And it's not necessarily that person's stuff. That's coming from me. Why is it within me to be like that? So that, and seeing the time thing, and also wanting to be in bed, what I've swapped the habit from is like, you wake up, look at the phone, I'll go to sleep, play with it before bed. Like, done with that. I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita now, which has been a great inspiration and push from yourself, which I'm very grateful for, man. Thank you for that. Reading that before bed is so much more fulfilling, and because I used to read before bed all the time and I forgot the joys of doing it. And it's like, now I'm not on social media for those 30 days, I'll pick up the book now, because it's, and I could feel the resistance in the habit to changing that, mainly because of dopamine, you know, or the egos, the critical mind, or the comparing, or what's the nosiness, what's everybody up to, you know, what, letting go of that, reading something that's healthy and whole for me, and changing it. Like, now the dopamine reflex isn't there. I'm sitting down as I would before, and my hand's not reaching it for anymore, and there was resistance at first, but now it's going. And before bed, I can't wait to sit and read that book for an hour, half an hour. It's great, and it's a difference that we have to be aware of, that we're doing it because it's so normal. That example you said of your mate's brilliant. What are you looking at your phone for? I don't know. Why do we carry it around with us all the time? I don't know. I remember Abs, she didn't want to put her phone onto flight mode at night in case an emergency happened or someone rang. Going, how often has that happened?
Yeah.
It hasn't. but you never know. Well, yeah, but you never know about everything. Don't punish and pain ourselves and trap ourselves into this small confined space because, it might happen. That's the fearful mind doing that.
Yeah.
If something happens at the middle of the night, what they call in, what can you actually do about that anyway? And very rarely it won't happen. So we'd rather sit with this Wi-Fi and these wires and this, all the, the false energy or the electromagnetic energy being poured into our heads overnight than just turning things off. Or my friend Alex, who we know does a podcast, he takes his phone out of the room now and he has a natural light that wakes him up, those alarms with the bird sounds. And it's just things like that, what we can do to take the phone away. How attached are we to the phone or to social media? And it's mad, man, it's mad.
Yeah, so there's a few things I want to go into there, but I'll start off with what you said in the latest part. So it's interesting what you say about the phone. I've definitely experimented with having the phone in the room. So when I have to wake up for an early morning block class, I'll have the phone in the room. And I can definitely admit that doing this for a period of up to a year now, when there is something like a phone in a room, my sleep is definitely disrupted. Like, it's not the same quality. Whereas if I leave the phone away and I trust myself to wake up on time, and I've done that a few times where I thought I'll just leave the phone downstairs, screw it. And every sort of couple of hours, I'll just kind of glance up at the clock and just to make sure that I'm not going to oversleep. But that, even then, even though I had disturbed sleep because I kept waking up like 5 times in the middle of the night just looking at the clock, it was better than having that device right next to you. Because there is something that's radiating, which is the electromagnetic radiation that comes from the phone that disturbs your sleep. And disturbing your sleep is probably the best thing it does. It's probably other things that it's probably doing to you as well, which is not good for you. And
it could be one of those things in a few years, like smoking was. It's fine, good for it. That holding this by your ear has been causing brain cancer, or brain shrinkage, or killing the nerves. I mean, like the wireless headphones are going to be bad for us, I think, in a few years, but it's just like, well, it's practical and it's cool and it's easy to do, but the big picture, man.
Yeah, it's like what we said in the previous podcast, where we said back in the days the doctors would prescribe pregnant women or women that were stressed with cigarettes. So it's the same concept as that. And once you get rid of that, you just observe how it feels for you. So if you're someone who doesn't believe in, it doesn't cause radiation, or it doesn't have this much and this and that, fair enough. Like, I have no problem people having that opinion. Try it out. Try and live without it, which is what fasting is. We talk about fasting as food, but you obviously fasted from social media. But if you cut it out for a period of time, the body will have its own sort of way of regenerating what's been missing in the body or what's been damaged. So cut it out and then just experience what the body's going through. If it's negative, the best thing you can do then is just implement whatever you were cutting out, and you've got nothing to lose in that situation. It's a very short period that you're cutting things out, but it's the fear that we're missing out. It's like exactly what you just said. It's the fear that you're missing out. If you start fasting, well, you're going to miss out in your best years to eat the best foods in the world, because eventually you're not going to be able to eat that. But what kind of world are we living in where we're having to continuously satisfy the tongue as opposed to satisfying the belly? So it's very being mindful about that. And like I said before the podcast, I've gone to a position in my life now where extreme tastes I know they're not good for me. So things that are too hot, too sweet, some people have a sweet tooth, and I used to be guilty of that. A few years back, I used to have a really strong sweet tooth where I would have to have something really sweet every day. And now I think about it, and just thinking about it makes me feel sick. So that's what fasting does to you. It brings your body back into that, what's that word? Homeostasis. It brings it back to that equilibrium in the body. And once you restore that, then you start to understand what is actually happening in the body, and you're actually listening to what the body wants. It's very interesting. And the other thing you were talking about was the prana. Now, when it comes to the prana and how much you breathe, they say that a human on average breathes 12 to 15 breaths in a minute, the average human being. Now, if you can cut that down, and I remember Sadhguru talking about this in one of his talks, if you can cut it down to 12 to 15, if you could cut it down to 9, you start to, he says, and I think it's meant in a metaphorical way, or maybe it's meant in a literal way, but you start to speak the language of animals. So you start to understand what animals are feeling. So for example, when animals sense certain disturbances around them. So when you feel like you meet someone and you've got this deep feeling inside of you that person isn't a good person or that person is an amazing person, you've got that deep feeling, that is part of your breathing. The slower you breathe, the more you're more in tune with that feeling. And you bring it down to 6. And I remember counting my breath the other day, and you've got to do it unconsciously to count the number of breaths you're breathing in. And it's quite difficult to do that as well, to catch yourself out and to maintain that steady pace of breathing to make sure that you are tracking it. And I managed to get to, and on average I would be breathing 6 breaths in a minute. And if you get to that rate, you start to talk in the language of Earth or the planet and their plants. So you start to understand the nature's fluctuations as well. And getting lower than that, you start to speak the language of consciousness or the universe. And yogis are usually around that range, 3 breaths a minute.
Man, I think there's a giant, listen to that video with Yogananda, and he was saying it, turtles, giant turtles, I think it was between 2 to 4 breaths.
Yes.
And they live for how long?
We literally watched a video about that last night, exactly that. Yeah, go on, what were you saying?
No, that was it, just how slow those turtles breathe, like 2 to 4 breaths a minute.
Well, they talk about trying to expand life and trying to increase the life expectancy of a human being. It's down to the breath. Yeah. If you look at the number of breaths that we're going to breathe for during our life, there is a certain number of breaths that you're going to breathe. You know, it's not random. There is a fixed number that you're going to breathe. Once you've hit that quota or that target, that's you done. You know, that's all your body can take. You're done. So, unless you die prematurely, but so you're meant to have a certain amount of breaths according to Eastern philosophy. We'll never find out that, because obviously we don't.
There's to know.
Yeah, we're never going to find out that. But it's interesting how you mentioned the tortoise. Yeah, the reason why they live so long is because they really slow down the breath. And the yogis talk about slowing down the breath to increase vitality in the body. So yeah, it is probably that as well.
With this is yoga, right? This is what we do with physical yoga. Is we're not doing it to look good, ideally. It's to tune the system and to make the body efficient and appropriate. And the reasons why they talk about breath so much in yoga, there's the shallow levels, and I don't mean shallow as in that shallow, I mean the shallow levels to the depths of what we do these practices for. The shallow level is breathe to relax and to be focused, but recondition your whole system. The more prana we're taking in, the more breath we're bringing in, the better the whole body's going to work, the more it's going to affect your mind and your consciousness and your habits. So just breathing steady, and the idea with yoga is being right into that whole movement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being present, and it's also the other word that we talked about, detachment. And we mention it quite a lot on this podcast, and it, like we said in the previous podcast, it has a very negative connotation attached to it, where it's related to religion almost, or spirituality, and people don't want to face that aspect. But then you've got to ask the question, what is the reason you are practicing that physical yoga? And a lot of people will say, well, it's because it makes me feel good, and it's exercise, and it's this and that. Yeah, that's great, but then that in itself is a spiritual practice, because the only reason you're getting some sort of benefit from it is it's adding to some part of yourself. So it might not be adding to your physical self, but it's adding to your spiritual self. So it's understanding that, and to really understand that the physical side of the yoga, and the yogis only sort of brought that up or came about that system created that system was so that you have the perfect environment to then practice the higher levels of yoga. And unfortunately, in today's yogic system, we're very much floating around the sort of the first layer or the iceberg of what yoga is, and we never truly go into the deeper aspects of yoga, which is understanding that you're moving away from the body and the mind. And a lot of the stuff that you see on social media, a lot of the insecurities from the yoga community come from, again, oh, my body's this and my body's that, and it's again attaching to the body. And people will say, well, that's quite easy to say, to not attach to your body, but how do you implement that in your daily life? So how would you...
I think, sorry mate, just before going to that question, is what you've just said there, how yoga's become about the body and the image rather than you said it so well before, that the idea is that's the first hurdle, is understanding you're not the body and not presenting it as the image. And so much of yoga in the modern social media field or the classes are just body based. It's okay, and I believe there's a positiveness about that. We're saying it's okay if your body's not ripped, it's okay to have fat rolls, it's okay to have cellulite, things like that. But we're really dealing with the first level of self understanding, and that once we've got past that and your body's a healthy system, you accept it for what it is, not trying to chisel it and make it look a certain way. That does bring benefits to the mind if you require that, right? You know, if you've never had self-confidence or you feel bad about yourself, you will go to achieve that first. But you can't then invest in that and think, right, that's what it's all about, because that's the first point, is you realize whether you're looking great or you're looking terrible, that's something to be overcome and not to be caught in that chase. You know, when you're after health, that will disintegrate itself. Sorry, what was the question you said?
So in today's society, in that environment, and again, it probably sounds as though we're probably putting down people, but we're not. We're trying to maybe go back to the roots of yoga, which I feel like a lot of people are trying to do. There's people that are practicing yoga. There is a sort of a positive aspect to it. But then again, every time you try and get out of the bubble of saying it's not about the body and it's not about the mind, and you're trying to distance yourself, someone or something pulls you back in and makes you almost associate or attached to it. So you might get a company that might approach you and say, look, we want you to be an ambassador for this company, our yogic clothing line, and it's bringing you back into the body and the mind. So how do we permanently, or how do we kind of move away from that?
I think that's a very internal process that the majority of us aren't aware of, or we're just not at that point where that's what we choose for our lives, because the material world's so enticing, you know, and it's something that we can't pretend I've not been a part of, or there's still pulls to be towards that. But like you're saying, if there's brands that want to go for this yoga or do that, where's our intention with our yoga? Is it something to be sold off? Do we believe that we can balance it? If you can, great. But how truthful are we with ourselves when we're doing that? So it's the integrity of the self, of the teacher, and what they're doing it for. Because I think people see it, the more exposure you have, the more you can help. But that's not true. It's the more exposure you have, the more danger you're going to be in to losing your core values. And I don't know if we spoke about it on the podcast, but when I did that breathwork session first, when Block went online for the breath session, there was over 1,000 people viewing it, and it hit me hard. And I was like, I really need to think about what I'm saying and what I'm sharing out, because I'd never experienced that many people tuning in, whether they all stayed or not, doesn't matter. The number was there, and I was like, I have to be integral with what I'm saying and make sure the value in the core is coming through, and it's not coming from my ego, or they're not there just for my personality. It's what do I want to share through that, and how do I maintain that? Because it's so easy, whether you've got likes or numbers or videos, or they shouldn't be anything to do with what your heart's saying. It's not about that. It's not about the likes. It's not about how many people have tuned in. Get your platform out there for sure, like Sadhguru and the Isha Foundation. I remember listening to him years ago. He was one of the first online teachers that I'd come across, and his style was actually quite different. I think he seems a lot more happy and relaxed with it does now. They used to be quite stern at times, or he would pick things out. Now he's just, he handles things so well. But even how the branding of Isha Foundation has transformed, and I believe they're working with the World Health Organization now. So I believe how he's done it, he's got the awareness to be able to manage the material world and the spiritual world. But as we are generally, do we know ourselves enough to be able to truthfully go through that? Are we blinded by the lights, or by how we look on Instagram, or what people say, or even when people talk about the sad things of life, it's okay not to feel like this. Sometimes we're diving into our own self-pity, and we feel like that, so we're telling people, it's okay to do that, when actually maybe we need a bit more oomph to go, why do I feel like that? It is okay, but why is it there? And again, you can never say what's right or wrong, because there's so many levels of consciousness and awareness happening at any one time. Nobody knows. You just have to be willing to be truthful with yourself, because there are people who can manage it. So Leo, for instance, great teacher, he's great, and we know him, and speaking to him, his heart is in the yoga, and it's not just like, oh yeah, I've done my gazillion hours training thing, and here's my certificate. It's like, his heart is in his practices. He's one of the best, definitely the best male teacher I've come across. And even myself in, say, one of his classes would be like, right, come on, you can get this handstand now, and push myself too far sometimes, because wanting to achieve, there's also the wanting to achieve, not just the comparisons of other people in there. So it's, I think, to really integrate, whether you're a teacher or a student, where's your heart at? What are you doing this for right now? Yeah. And where are we tricking ourselves about it? Yeah.
So there is a saying in the Eastern world when it comes to the scriptures, and I think, I don't know which, I think it might be Sadhguru who talked about it. It says, there are so many scriptures out there, there's so many books out there, but then one day you have to let go of those. You know, and I feel like we seek comfort in those books. So, you know, we were talking about the Bhagavad Gita before this, and the 18 days YouTube videos, but it's so easy to watch that and to get caught up in that, but then never do anything about it. So when Krishna talks about trying to connect with the eternal sort of force or light of the universe, it doesn't mean understanding that, okay, he says that he's the creator and he's also life and death. But then how do you relate to that? So when he talks about the Atman, which is separating yourself from the body and the mind and relating yourself to the Atman, which is the real self, you have to experience that. You can just read about it. And this is something, it's not just modern people in the West that get caught up in this. It's also the East. The East have this issue where, you know, you might go to a monk and the monk will tell you, oh, look at this scripture and read this and that. But it's like, okay, you've read this scripture and you've studied it and you can quote it to me inside out, you know, get me the exact reference point. But have you experienced even a tiny bit of it? So when Krishna or someone's talking about the Atman, have you experienced that? Have you seen that eternal light? No. So it's like, you know, you're completely going by blind faith. So going back to what you said about Sadhguru, he's changed his approach now because he feels as though, you know, it's all well and good to talk about it and say this and that, but again, it's just theory and it's just a book and it's a person's interpretation. What you need to do is go out there and experience it for yourself. So this is one of the reasons why yoga for many years and still is in the East is known as a science. It's a science of discovery, self-discovery, which means whatever you go through, I can never fully understand that until I go through it. So I come to you to say, how did you do it? And you will try and help me to try and achieve what you achieved. But until I fully achieve what you experience, or maybe glimpse a tiny bit of it, I can't fully buy into it. And I think it's that separation between faith and complete blind devotion. And I think we're getting too caught up into that trap of blind devotion and then relating it back into Western yoga. This is it. Some yoga foundation or yoga teacher training course, or someone you follow on YouTube or Instagram, etc., has told you that reading this book is beneficial for you and you need to understand it. But we get caught up in the dogma. And I think there's a book, funnily enough, one of my mentors, Kit Lachlan, talks about it. It's called Breaking Through Spiritual Materialism. And this is exactly it. It's spiritual materialism. You're getting attached to spirituality just as though you would get attached to anything materialistic. So cars, women, fame, money, etc. You're getting attached to it in that way, and that's not the way you want to do it. So when we talk about detachment is moving away from that aspect, which is moving away from everything you think is yourself, which is what you see in the mirror, how people perceive you, what you tell yourself every day. Is moving away from that, and that part is very difficult when you've got an environment, and like you said, when you've got distractions and people coming to you and saying, you know, oh, I think you're amazing for allowing me to do this and that. You can get caught up with that, and it's very easy to do that. And the hardest thing, and there aren't many people that fully break through that and stay consistent out of that realm. And like we said, I think Leo is great at doing that because he understands who he is, he understands what his practice is, and he's always about that first of all before he's there as a teacher. And I think you need to do that. Your practice has to show people the light itself.
Yeah, and that's great. And they're people to look towards to learn from that experience and not through imitation. Because when we imitate it, it's still not genuine. We'll say those words in our head or the sentence structure, or we'll quote the book, but it's not, do we still have that attitude outside of saying that conversation to that person or showing that post? Are we still really deeply working on that, or is it just to be seen a certain way, or because we think it's right? Because imitation, it's not genuine. And I think to find that level of authenticity requires you to have the experience. Like we learn the words or what somebody says, okay, yeah, I like that advice, so I'm going to go with it. But truly committing to exploring it and going through it, because you'll never change otherwise, or we'll never get there, or we'll never realize something else if we think it's okay, I've learned that now. And knowledge is just in the mind, that's it. Unless it's acted upon, it's not wisdom, it's not integrated. You can read, and I know because I did it, just read as many books as you want, amass a good level of intellect, but there's no life experience. It's just words. It's just words that I've known, like that works like that, bang bang bang, great, you know, where's the feeling, where's the heart? Because we're just stuck in the mental realm then, in the head, which is very the case for most of the masculine energies is mind. You know, we're headspace and trippy, while women are generally grounded, a bit more feeling and down to earth with what's there in front of them. So it's the emergence of those energies. Obviously that's generalization, but that's the prominence of male, masculine and feminine energy. So it's to be to go through the experience of it, and really trying to explore it truthfully, and being vindictive in what you say, and you know, and that's where you are speaking as you are. And to go back to what you just said about, you know, the detachment and letting go of these things from the body or the image is one of the greatest masters of our time, Master Yoda. Train yourself to let go of what you're afraid to lose. And when you can do that, which might be the image, which might be letting go of social media for a month, it might be drinking the coffees every day like I was doing, it might be you know, whatever we're holding on to be seen a certain way. Can you let go of it? Because if you can, you'll get closer to your true self. The letting go of impermanence, you know, the bodily image or what you think somebody thinks, or even your thoughts are all impermanent. Look for something that's permanent, which is only God and the soul. In the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, there was a line that stuck out so much for me, which said there's only two paths to serve. You're either serving Krishna, God, or you're serving illusion. And it hit me, and I was like, wow, like it's as simple as that. I mean, that was just so profound for me, because it makes so much sense. It really puts that slice in. It's either all about God, which is in everything and everyone. So you're doing it, again, this concept of God, I don't know where the general consensus for people's view on that is anymore, because we were brought up in atheist times generally, and then it's like, oh, a man in the sky, and I think that image is on its way out now. God for me is the universe, it's consciousness, it's life, it's creation, it's an intelligence that is way beyond my understanding and limited mind can ever comprehend. But to see that through God, you're generating compassion, you're generating love, you're seeing yourself within everything and everyone around you, so you'll treat it better, or you'll try and understand it, or serve your illusions, serve what your mind says, serve the stories around you. Oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm the best there ever was, or I've got to achieve this, or I need that much money. Or learn to live with what's provided through life, through God. And it's, you know, it's a difficult path. I think that line makes it sound simple, but it can also be that simple as well if we are vindictive and we choose that path, and we'll know when we're not doing it as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, even with the God concept, so I think it was Sadhguru who said this, and it really, again, like that line opened up your eyes when you heard that, or when you read that. This same line opened my eyes up. So he was talking about in India, they were thinking of rebuilding this Ram temple, so incarnation of one of the Hindu gods. So Krishna was the next incarnation after Ram, and so they were talking about Ram as the. He says, don't see him as a god. We don't celebrate him as a god. We celebrate him as a human being. So he goes, the issue with when you deal or treat someone as God is that you just put a picture of him on the wall and that's it. He stays the picture. Whereas if you've got someone who's relatable, like a man or a human being, and has the flaws of a human being, then you can aspire to get to that level, even if that human being is far up there. So a king or someone in these days, you know, a celebrity or someone that you look up to, who you aspire to almost achieve their sort of level. You can aspire to that level because you understand that person is still a human being, which is what you are. But when you put someone on the pedestal and you make him God, it becomes, there's either two ways. You understand God is like exactly what you said, which is everything and anything. You know, the whole of creation has come from one source. You and I came from the same source, which is the earth, you know, the materials of the earth and the 5 elements and stuff. So we are part of the same, you know, structure. So for me to serve you is serving what's created us. So there's that aspect, and then there's the other aspect, which is to treat the incarnations of gods as what they were, which were, they came as human beings. You know, they came as human beings, so then they could deal with life just as human beings would deal with it. So then you can look up and say, okay, this person did this. As much as he was divinity or was the incarnation of divinity, you can at least aspire and say, this person, it was at my level, he was still a human being, he bled like me, you know. So to bring him down, and he says Ram, the reason why we celebrate Ram is because of how, even through all the struggles. So I don't know if you know the story about the Ramayana, when he was a king, He was meant to be the king, and
is Ramana, is it?
Rama.
Is he an incarnation of God then, as Krishna was?
Yeah, so there are 10 major avatars in Hinduism. So 10 major incarnations of the divine. Krishna was the next one before Ram. Ram was the one before Krishna. So Krishna's sort of guru, or Krishna's sort of God he used to pray to, was Ram. So that's how it works. It works in the chain. And funnily enough, Gautama Buddha, he was an incarnation, is part of the incarnation list as well. Yeah, so when Krishna was interesting because for 16 years of his life, he was a cowherd. He used to hang around with cows, he used to have friends, he used to do everything that a normal teenager would do. And then after the 16th year, when he went to a mountain and he decided to take up his destiny, his guru told him, look, you've got this destiny, you need to do it, you need to get rid of your life. So he was in love with this woman, Radha. You see all together, so you always see Krishna and Radha together. He was in love with her, but he gave up that lifestyle of living with comfort, and it was a struggle for him. So I used to think, because he was divine, it was always his path, this is what he was going to do. But it was a struggle for him, which is exactly how it would be for us. If you love someone, but you couldn't be with them because they were already supposed to be married to someone else, what do you do? You allow yourself to fall in love with this person, but you can't be with them. So it's very difficult, it's hurtful. And he said to his guru, I don't want to take this path, I'm happy where I am, I don't care if anyone knows me or not, but I want to be part of this life. And he said, look, this is not your path, this is not you speaking, you need to go and do this, you need to go on to this journey. So when he went to this mountain nearby him, Mount Govardhan, he stood there and he became enlightened. He realized, this is my path. So his path in life was to be a part of, or become immersed in the political aspect of India, not just the spiritual aspect, which was different to any of the previous incarnations. They never came down on earth to be part of the political aspect. They came to obviously get rid of evil, bring sort of religion and justice back, but they were never part of the spiritual, I don't know what I'm talking about, the political spectrum of life. But he was a part of that. So he became an advisor for a king, and obviously King Yudhishthir from the Mahabharata. He became an advisor for him, and he was an advisor for his friends Arjun, even for the enemy Duryodhan. He was an advisor for him as well. So Duryodhan also respected him so much as well. People knew how respected Krishna was. So he learned the political game. He knew how to have the right people in charge and make sure the kingdoms are working in the right way. So that's why the kingdom Dwarika was prosperous for many thousands of years. Whilst when Krishna was alive, and then when he died, it was still very prosperous. But going back to Ram was very interesting because he was the only incarnation out of the 10 that went through struggle after struggle. So countless setback after setback. So he was supposed to be a king. He was sent away to the forest on exile for 12 years. Came back, was a king for a bit. Then it was found. Then his wife was kidnapped whilst on exile. So he had to go search for her. Found her, came back, became the king. And then it was found out that Sita was pregnant. So the villagers were like, well, we can't have a queen that may have not had a child with you. What happens if it's someone else's child? So they accused her of adultery. So they sent her away, and Rama to say, okay, I can't do anything about this. So he sent her away. And a lot of modern Indians would say, well, Ram was insecure. And Sadhguru really goes quite deep in this, and I've never seen him so stern about something. Obviously he's quite chilled, but he's very much stern about this. And he said, well, how can you call him insecure when, if you're a king and your queen is known as the mother of the nation, and the villagers are raising a question or have some sort of doubt about who the offspring are, so you're going to give the kingdom to the offspring eventually. So if you have any sort of doubt, he could have easily said, well, she's my wife, I don't believe you. And if anyone's got any issues, that's treason, I'll just cut your head off. He could have been that king, but he said, no, I want to be a good king. So he allowed the villagers to dictate how things went. So the villagers said, we need her to go into exile, which was the law back then. So he sent his own wife to exile when he knew that she didn't cheat on him. So he had to go through all that procedure. Then, let me just backtrack. Before he killed Ravan, which is the person who kidnapped Sita, he killed him. And he went into 1 year of penance, moved away, and his brother asked him, Lakshman, he goes, why the hell are you doing this? Because this man was evil. He goes, yes. for many, many years, and many characteristics of him were evil, but he had one good characteristic, which was he was a devotee, a devout person of God. And for that, I have to go into penance, and I have to, go into a year of just purely focusing and meditating and repenting what I've done. So, and this was Ram, someone who was a king. He didn't need to do this. And the crimes of Ravan were already there, but he did that because he was that kind of person. So throughout his entire life, he just had setback after setback after setback. And yet he never once had animosity towards anyone, had never experienced resentment towards anyone. Any of the negative characteristics, never was angry towards anyone. He always kept a very calm mind. So this is one of the reasons why we celebrate him as who he was as a king and also as God, because this is something that we should aspire to be like in that environment. So yeah, and this is something that we tend to do with things that we consider as God. We put them on a pedestal, or like we say, we put them on a picture and we never think about them. Whereas if they have human traits and human flaws, then we can at least say, look, if this person was able to do this, surely we can do the same thing. Or even do 10% of the things that this person was able to do. So I think that's really important as well. We need to make sure that when we look at these figures in the past, even like Jesus Christ, Jesus still had all of his issues that he went through as well. And it's to understand that this person was still human as well. So not giving the image of the man with the long beard as this sort of stereotypical image of God, bringing away from that and to realize that these people had, even if people considered them as gods, they still had their human characteristics, which meant that they had their human flaws as well. Yeah. Accepting of that,
it gives us that the path to work towards, to know that it is aspirations that can be achieved when it is very human. And you'll never meet somebody who's not been through some kind of problems. And it's just the mindset that we use to get through those issues. And when we're in our struggling or strife periods, who do we look to for that? Or whatever feeling we're in, the feelings that we have, they just want to feel more. Whether we're sad, angry, lustful, joyful, whatever's there, unless we have awareness of it, we're just going to stay in that cycle and we'll let it figure itself out. But it's a case of choosing to observe it within yourself and go, do I want this feeling? Is it constructive? Are these people I'm listening to, or are the things I'm doing, are they actually of benefit to the life I want or to who I want to be? And not being a victim to what's happening with it, and just staying, well, I'm just going through the motions. And I think that's where you discern somebody who has a level of awareness about themselves or doesn't, is the person who's switched off will just be going into these emotions constantly and riding the roller coaster without the awareness that they're on a roller coaster first. That's the first part. And then it's knowing that you can get off the roller coaster, and we'll always, there'll be emotions coming up and down, but it will just, the ride gets smoother and smoother all the time. And the more things that get thrown in your way, eventually you can just handle them easy because you're not attached. It's not personal in that sense. It's not about you. It's not the world's out to get you. God, the world's doing it all for you. It's just you're a part of life, and you can see it as that way. And there was a really good bit in the Bhagavad Gita about being a limb of God, and I really like that sense that the Creator has created everything, and you are just fulfilling that role. And if you're not doing it from a cleansed perspective or a clear and insightful way, it's going to go to the wrong places. So the example it used was the stomach. So if you eat for the stomach, you'll eat fine. If you're eating for the senses, as you said before, you're eating for the taste, it's not going to where the fuel should be going, and you'll do yourself damage because it's sensorial and it's not fulfilling its energetical properties because it's about consuming. And it said also, if the fingers, the hands, the eyes are looking for the food, the hands will pick up the food, the teeth will grind the food, and the belly absorbs it and gets satisfied that way. And it's being satisfied with good, clean, healthy food, not the sensorial, not the taste, not the material world where the average person would probably say, but I love taste, but I want to do it because of that. Well, all right, but know that that's not because it's provided. That's you, that's personality, that's ego, that's wants and desires. Everything in its place. It's not wrong. It's just, what lifestyle are we living, and do we know there's another layer up? There's a higher level to get to. And it just really gelled with me in the sense of, be in service and be in for God and be in for the change. You know, what is your interest? What do you generally love to do, and who your characteristics are on the higher aspect of yourself, and fulfill your role in life through that way. And the description of God speaks to you through your heart. You know, when the heart is speaking, people say, listen to your heart. That's where the seat of God is, and it's the pure teachings are through there, and that's why we can get through our life so easy. The Sadhguru conversation when he bumped into a farmer or a guy in the marketplace, and he was just like, you're enlightened, you're on that space. And he's like, why are you selling fruit and veg in markets? That's just what I do, and I'm happy doing this. And you can be very simple, or just live on a farm, and you don't have to have all this deep, intense knowledge. It's just, what's the purity of your heart saying? When you get lost and confused, find help from people who have been there or can help untangle it. We do always have the answers, but it has to be put into action, doesn't it? We have to live it through, and to know that, are you serving the heart, God, consciousness, love, life, whatever you want to say it, or are you serving the desires and the wants and the aversions and the personality and the small me rather than the big me? It requires the willingness to let go of who you are, the willingness to let go of personality and what you think life is and what you want it to be. Can you tell that to an average person who's not on some sort of, or not had some sort of spiritual experience? Probably not. And that's fine, because again, all different levels, all different times, your life will be as it is, but we can just be conscious and aware of where we're going with it and why we're doing those things. Yeah. And I think, from my experiences, living in that way of service, of letting go, of doing what the king was doing, and exiling his wife and accepting to go into exile and all these things, like, he was doing it in service because his personality wasn't there. He was still a man. He was just more aware of consciousness or God, or again, whatever term we want to use. He was more aware of the bigger picture, because it's all one mechanism. And we see separation so much, and that is where comparison comes in. That's where scrolling on Instagram is like comparing, well, that's the mind, that's not real. That person is living their life, and whether it's good or bad doesn't matter. If you can help direct things in a positive way, it's not necessarily your job to do that, but if you can sit and have a conversation or listen to somebody or do something of a constructive nature because it feels well for you and for that person. I was talking to a friend about before about the hashtag 1 piece a day, just picking up litter, and simple, we were talking about the challenge of doing it the first time, because are people going to think, oh, why is this guy picking, I remember that in my head, why are you picking up litter off the floor? And then I was thinking, really, that's going to stop me from doing something of benefit? And then my friend said, well, is it selfish then? You're doing it to get that feeling. But that's the feeling of God. Wants you to do things that are feeling good for you and benefit of the world. Because I replied, well, what you're picking it up for is like, well, to clean the earth. So it wasn't about people in his answer. And I said, exactly. If you're doing it to clean the earth, who are you doing that for? Well, it's everybody. So everybody does it. But the ego could go, I'm going to show everybody that I'm picking litter up. Or the ego can go, oh, I'm too afraid to pick litter up. It's not about any of those answers. It's about what's right. Regardless of the renown that comes with it or the hate that comes with it. What's right for you? What's right in the heart that benefits everybody? Difficult to get there, I think, because the ego and personality is so ingrained. Be individual, be who you are. There's a way to do that that's beneficial. That isn't sticking your finger up to society and doing away with all the masks, and there isn't, going to the protests, but there isn't the side that blindly follows and adheres to every single rule that's out there because we can't think for ourselves. Yeah, definitely. I think you've pretty much covered it there. And I think it's also, like you said, and we have to emphasize this point, everyone's on a separate path. Everyone's doing their own stuff. Whether you're material or not, that's fine. You might have a love for cars, you might have a love for collecting things. That's perfectly fine. There's no issues with that. And everyone's on their own separate path, and it's accepting that some people will just be a bit more materialistic than other people. It's when we start having issues when, if you feel as though, okay, I've already quenched that thirst now, I've done that. But then you do it because you want other people to think that this is the right way of doing things. Or like your example of picking up litter, you might feel as though, this is the right thing to do for the environment, which is the pure attitude to have. But then in the process of doing it, you like you said, you might have had some sort of friction at the start in your head saying that, why are you doing this? You're picking up litter on the ground. What will people think of you? But you've crossed that barrier and you've gone through it. The hardest part is after that is when you
cross that barrier and then you feel happy about doing it. But then you've got the other side, which your ego almost brings it back into the sort of material aspect of reality, which is like, okay, now you've done this and it makes you feel good. How would you feel if you did it in front of more people? You know, how would that? You've got the gratifying aspect of that. And it's the first rule of thumb is to become aware or conscious of that aspect. It's going to kick in at some point. You know, it might not happen now. You might have just picked up 5 pieces of litter over the past, 4 days. It might kick in 3 months down the line when you're in front of a group of people, or someone might see that and invite you to an environmental festival or something and say, want you to speak. So it has its ways of testing you out. And people say, well, I don't believe that the reality or life is testing me, or I don't believe that God's testing me, etc. That's fine. But then reality, if you believe in challenges in life, then it is a form of test, whether it's presented to you by life, or you've created that environment for it to be presented to you, or you believe that the universe or God is created that challenge for you. It's there. Now, the reason why it's there, it doesn't matter. It's what you're going to do about it. So are you going to address it like Arjun in the battle of Kurukshetra, just before when the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to him? He said, originally, that's Craig misses there.
Hello.
Right, we're back, and Craig's let his missus in. That's important. That comes first before all of this.
Compassionate action.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. So before the cusp of the war, Arjun he's supposed to be this warrior. This is his destiny. This is what he lived up to. This is what his path is in life. And yet, before the cusp of the war, when it happens, he crumbles and he doesn't want to do it anymore. He doesn't want to kill anyone because he feels as though it's wrong to kill his cousins, his grandfathers, on the other side, his teachers. And Krishna, in the first chapter, and you're in the first chapter, or you're in the preface, right?
Just to explain that, and he was saying that he doesn't want to rule a kingdom when he's had to do so much death and slaughter everybody. Yeah, so Krishna goes from chapter number 2 to number 18, I think. He talks about it and goes fully in depth with why Arjun should participate in the war. And he says that it's his dharma, it's his duty, his eternal duty to participate in this war. And people would be thinking, if anyone who's not read the Bhagavad Gita or heard of it would be thinking, why would divinity tell you to participate in a war? It makes no sense. But he does go into detail, and I had a lot of questions when I first started reading it. So going back to what we were saying, when the moment counts the most, are you willing to step up? Are you going to step up? Are you going to push ego aside, or are you going to push your doubts and your struggles aside and say, actually, that's not me, that's not who I am. I'm going to actually just perform my duty in this. So it's the same concept as like we talked about picking up the litter. If someone says to you, what you're doing is amazing and you're doing it now for the attention of other people, it's your responsibility to address that and say, actually, this is not the real way of doing this. Because what will happen is, you may not feel bad about it right now, but eventually the feeling will start to creep in eventually. And usually a lot of people tend to become depressed and burnt out and have mental health problems because of that reason. It's because you've attached yourself so much to a particular result and a particular way that people see you, and it's probably worse for people to not be able to see you in that way and for you to kind of move away from that than for you to just decide that actually I'm going to stop doing it this way and I'm going to do it a completely different way, so then people don't see me in this very superficial way. So it goes back to what we were saying about yoga. It's quite difficult. The hard path is to step up and say, I'm not going to associate myself with the body or the mind. I'm going to present myself in the purest form, which is to try and serve without any attachment towards the service. And yeah, it's going to make you feel good, and that's fine. That's part and parcel of it. But I'm not going to let that feeling completely override my action and why I'm doing this. So it's addressing that head on. And like I said, you might not do it voluntarily, but eventually we'll have to do it. So it's better to do it voluntarily than being forced to do it eventually down the line. Yeah, it ties really well in with the last podcast about death, and the little brief convo we had outside is seeing that death is going to come one way or the other, and we off-put it because, funnily enough, I don't think people just see it as an important thing while you're younger. It'll motivate a hell of a lot of our actions, but when you're in your young life, or even as you get older, we don't talk about it or address it. And really, if we, rather than dealing with it when it comes, which is the attitude, we can deal with it when it's not there because it's inevitable, but also in case something unexpected occurs, we already have an understanding. And it doesn't have to be done with everything because there's countless things we could apply that to. But when you have a greater knowledge or a spiritual understanding and true depth of self and looking at these things, you'll be prepared for much more, and you're not thrown around by the unexpected parts of life, which are always going to come. And the unexpected parts are always the most fun parts too, because you're not predicting and controlling. Because when you come to predicting and controlling, there's no point in being alive. There's no life in that. It's just a machine process. And that's the point of not thinking every single thing down to a T, and it has to be like, we get stuck in the head. It's to live it. Use the mind as a way to navigate through things and to consider, if you're going to climb the mountain, how am I going to climb the mountain? Right, okay, then go do it. And that's what knowledge is. Or we read the scripture or the book and it says, like that line, from what we're talking about that said, for me, that stuck out, you either worshipping Krishna or you worship an illusion. And, we've said before, am I just reading a line from a book that I'm now going to run with, or does it gel, does it click, and do I go and explore that more and then see what it is to see God in everybody and everything and live through that way? And you try these things for at least 3 weeks, a new mode of thinking or a new exercise, a new diet, and does it work? And can I put long-term longevity in it? Okay, great, knowledge is there to help us bump up to the next point. The knowledge is coming from outside. Generally, if we're reading or talking, thanks, you made me think about that. To turn it into life and wisdom is doing the action of it, and then and then you can talk about it, or you can connect even more, or you can share it out more, rather than just reading the quote. Well, do this, but what do you know of the experience?
Yeah, and I think it is that, and that's the best way to summarize it. It is the experience itself that you should be probably chasing. If you read something about something, you want to experience it, right? If you go back to food, if you read about the delicacies of, God knows, like a particular type of food, you want to experience it for yourself to make sure that it is what it is on the book. And for some people, that might not be the experience they want. So a particular dish that you might read might not actually be what it turned out to be for you. So the only way you're going to find that out is if you actually go out there and experience it for yourself. And people have experienced enough, people have experienced enough misery and suffering to realize that actually focusing so much on the way I look and presenting that as the image is not solving anything. And people do it in the most positive light they possibly can, but it really isn't solving anything. It's like I mentioned it to a yogic friend of mine who I said, look, you're just treating the symptoms and not actually going to the root cause of the problem by replacing one category of people and then replacing it with another category. All you're doing is you're disguising it. You're placing a bandage over the issue and then waiting for it to heal by itself. And then when it opens up again, you're complaining about the same issue again. So address the issue at the root cause of the problem. I think that's the best way to deal with it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Right. I think that's been a great podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that an hour had passed.
It's flown by for me, that one. Yeah. I'm really enjoying it.
Right. So this was podcast number 22. As usual, it's going to be on YouTube as a full video, on Spotify, and I think now we're on Apple Music. What's it called? iTunes.
Oh,
iTunes.
There,
yeah. I didn't realise that Anchor, the sort of the website I'm using, is doing that. Yeah. So it puts it on Spotify and it puts it on iTunes as well. So you can also listen to this on iTunes if you are an Apple advocate, let's say. But yeah, so we'll see you in the next one, guys.
Yeah, lot of love, guys.
Done.